Have you ever wondered why God would ask Abraham to do something so difficult? Abraham had waited many years for a son. God had promised him that through his son, Isaac, his descendants would become a great nation. But then one day, God gave Abraham a command that seemed impossible to understand. God told him to take Isaac, his beloved son, and offer him as a sacrifice. Why would God do this? And more importantly, why would God test Abraham this way? This is the story of Abraham's greatest test of faith. Abraham was already an old man when God promised that he and his wife Sarah would have a son. Humanly speaking, it seemed impossible, but God kept his promise. Sarah became pregnant and Isaac was born. Isaac was more than just Abraham's son. He represented God's promise. He was the child Abraham had waited for, the child through whom God had promised to build a great nation. But years later, God tested Abraham. Genesis chapter 22 tells us that God called Abraham and said, "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love." Abraham was instructed to travel to the land of Moriah and offer Isaac there. Imagine what Abraham must have felt. This was the son he loved, the son God had promised, the son Abraham had waited so many years to receive. Yet Abraham obeyed. Early the next morning, he prepared the wood, took Isaac, and began the journey. As they traveled, Isaac noticed something was missing. There was wood, there was fire, but there was no animal for the sacrifice. So Isaac asked his father, "Where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb." They continued up the mountain, and when they reached the place God had chosen, Abraham built the altar. He arranged the wood. Then he bound Isaac and placed him on the altar. Imagine the tension of that moment. Abraham raised his hand, but before he could carry out the sacrifice, the angel of the Lord called out to him, "Abraham, Abraham!" And Abraham answered, "Here I am." The angel told him not to harm the boy. Now God knew that Abraham was willing to trust him completely. Then Abraham looked up. Nearby was a ram caught by its horns in a bush. God had provided a substitute. The ram was offered instead of Isaac. But why did God test Abraham like this? The Bible tells us that God was testing Abraham. The test was not because God needed to discover what Abraham was thinking. God already knew. The test revealed Abraham's faith and obedience. Abraham had to trust God even when he could not understand what God was doing. God had promised that Isaac would be part of his covenant, and yet God was asking Abraham to surrender the very thing he had been promised. Abraham's faith meant trusting God's character even when the circumstances didn't make sense. And there is another powerful lesson in this story. If this message spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more powerful Bible stories, biblical lessons, and messages of faith. Isaac was spared. God provided a substitute. The ram took the place of Isaac. For Christians, this points toward a much greater biblical theme: God providing a sacrifice in the place of another. The story of Abraham and Isaac reminds us that faith is not always about having all the answers. Sometimes faith means trusting God when you cannot see what comes next. Maybe you're in a season right now where you don't understand what God is doing. Maybe you're waiting for a promise. Maybe you're facing a difficult decision. Or maybe God is asking you to surrender something you've been holding on to tightly. Remember Abraham. He could not see the entire plan, but he trusted the one who could. And at the moment when Abraham needed provision, God provided. The lesson is not that we should blindly follow every thought or feeling we have. The lesson is that we can trust God's character, his promises, and his word. Abraham's greatest test became one of the greatest demonstrations of faith in Scripture. Sometimes the hardest part of faith is not knowing how the story will end. But faith says, "God, I don't understand everything, but I trust you."